making these accommodations for the entire class actually benefits all of the kids. So anything that is going to benefit an ADHD kid will actually benefit all of the kids. Hello, truth tellers. Welcome back to the ADHD Scapegoat Podcast. I'm Angie.
I'm Jeremy. If back to school season feels more like a breakdown waiting to happen than a fresh start, you're not alone. Today we're unpacking why the back to school transition hits ADHD families hard, what parents notice over the summer, and the top 3 things you can do to set your child up for success without losing your own mind in the process.
Yeah.
Summer gives parents a front row seat to their child's nervous system in action.
Yeah, I mean, summer's always kind of crazy for everyone. I mean, there's some people, kids go to camps, some people go to their grandparents, there's different ways in which people make summers work, especially with younger kids, but there's definitely less structure. That's part of the school routine, and those days of the week, there's an automatic structure in that you don't really have to do a lot with. Yes, you need to prepare your kid. Yes, you need to do all those things, but half of the day they're at school, right? So when there's less structure, the ADHD symptoms and traits are a lot more visible. So, impulsivity, emotional dysregulation, executive dysfunction, all these things really appear when there's less structure. And that's why we talk about routines. It's not like strict, on the dot, everything has to go exactly to plan. But there has to be the safety of a routine. They know when things need to be done. And a lot of that kind of goes out the window, or you have to implement it as the parent when summer comes around. So in the summertime, when you're starting to notice this, if you haven't noticed it already, you'll start, Googling symptoms, trying to get into your doctor to get evaluated. Maybe school was masking some of the symptoms, or maybe you saw them so clearly because they masked their symptoms in school, came home and melted down. But either way, you're seeing them now all day. So it's kind of amplifying those behaviors that surface when their symptoms aren't managed. There's just a realization like, it's not just this one-off incident where they seem kind of impulsive. I've noticed a pattern of this happening. Might be ADHD, like this thing is showing up, this thing is showing up, this symptom. And once you start to recognize the patterns and you're just aware, you'll start to see a little more clearly, which allows you to take those next steps, right? And like I said, your kids spending all of their time with you now, or all of their time. I mean, if they are going to a camp, maybe the camp, counselor or whatever is the one communicating their symptoms to you and their behaviors. Or if they're at grandma and grandpa's or something like that all summer, they're the ones expressing it. But you will get the full picture if you haven't already, because it's all day. So the first step is to notice. And just because you're noticing right now and, oh my gosh, it's summer, I feel like this stuff has always been there. Maybe I'm behind. I should have already been doing something. No, the first step is to notice. And now that you notice, do something about it.
Transitions are like a class in executive function deficits.
Yes.
And ADHD brains are often ready to skip class.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny, but I think transitions are huge. And a lot of times, if you're not paying attention and realizing that this is a transition for your kid, then you will end up just being like, oh my gosh, that reaction came out of nowhere. What is happening? All I said was, it's time to go brush your teeth. And there's a meltdown, But when it comes to back to school and those transitions, it's a big deal if you think about it as an adult, you transitioning to a new job or a new boss is like, think about your anxiety and your nerves and, oh, everything is new. You know, there's a new process, or, you know, now I have to report to this person and now I have employees under me or something. You know, that transition as an adult can be overwhelming, filled with anxiety. You know, you're nervous. Kids, every single year with a new teacher, there's new routines, there's sensory overload.
New classmates.
Yeah. You can
New classroom.
Even if it's excited feelings, there's still emotions that can be all over the place.
I know for our boys, especially our older son, when he gets to go see, they do the supply drop off. And so the kids can go with, and then they get to meet their teacher for the first time in some cases, and they get to see the classroom where they're going to be. And I know for our ADHD kids, that's helped tremendously, especially for our older one. He'll go in and he'll really take in his setting. Like, okay, this is where I'm going to be. He's mentally preparing himself at the end of August before, because our kids go back to school in the beginning of September. And so he's like mentally preparing himself. He's taking it in. I remember a couple of years ago, he came home and he's like, my classroom's like a living room. It's going to be so cool. I'm going to feel so comfortable there, because he has his comfort area in our living room, like where he does his own thing. And he was like bringing that level of like safety to school.
Well, and they do notice things. So they'll you know, latch on to things that they like, and then that helps them look forward to it. And we'll talk more about that later. But I think all the newness, right? You know, ADHD brains love novelty, but all of the newness can be super overwhelming and cause them to dysregulate. Sometimes there's emotional flooding where they're completely out of control. They might refuse to go to school because they're scared, or there can be after school meltdowns. And it might look like bad behavior, but they're actually just these signals for you to pay attention to and ask more questions. And a lot of times educators can misread behaviors without context. So this has been a mission of mine, and I will continue to work diligently on this because it is so important, but trying to open up that communication early, which we'll talk about too, but it's so important to make sure that your child is being seen clearly for who they are, and not just a reaction to a certain behavior that comes out of dysregulation. And a lot of times when parents, you know, say they're scrambling over the summer and all of a sudden it's back to school, and I know especially when you kind of have had a little bit less structure, you have to get everything ready, you have to do all the back to school shopping, you have to do all the things to get them set up. And it can feel like a scramble. So then you're like, oh my gosh, is this normal? Wait, I have to do a 504 or an IEP, or, oh my gosh, really? I have to talk to my child's teacher? Like, oh, now is he going to be labeled the bad kid if I tell them that he has ADHD? You know, those types of things can come out. But this isn't just like, you know, back to school nerves. For an ADHD family, it's really like an event, and it's an opportunity to offer support, have, you know, harder conversations, and just open up that communication so everyone feels a lot better about that transition.
I think too, you know, especially for someone who has a child who was just diagnosed, and maybe they are, you know, got diagnosed at the end of their school year, and so maybe the teacher doesn't even know because they haven't implemented the 504 yet, or the IEP, and or they're diagnosed over the summer, right? And they're going into a new school year as kind of like the first school year after diagnosis. As a new parent, you probably tend to think, okay, the teacher's never seen this before. My son's or daughter is the first one that this teacher will ever have with ADHD. And you kind of like shoulder that burden of like, oh, you know, do I do I talk to the teacher and like, will they focus on that, on my kid and think like, okay, I'm going to really keep an eagle eye on them.
Or there's also the part where the teacher, where the parent feels like, I'm telling the teacher things they already know. I don't want to make it seem like the teacher doesn't know anything about this. So I'm just going to assume that they understand, right?
So I think parents would be shocked to find out, or it's really surprising, how many kids in school have ADHD, whether they're diagnosed or not. How many kids this teacher has seen go through their classroom who have had ADHD. So they've experienced it, but like you've said in previous episodes, every neurodivergent brain is a snowflake. Yeah. Everyone has little differences. And so even if the teacher has been teaching for 40 years and they've seen everything, it's still a good idea to talk to the teacher about your child and their diagnosis and, what will help them thrive.
Right.
You're not being needy. You're not telling someone something that they already know. It's not brand new to this person. It's a very common thing. I just think that there's that stigma of either, I don't want to be the one to stand out by bringing it up, or I don't want to seem preachy because like I know it all.
Or I don't want to be like the parent who's complaining or like trying to get special treatment for my kid. There's like a lot of things that the parent is carrying these ideas without actually communicating this.
Exactly. They're in their own head. And it's very easy to do that.
That can be from how you were raised, those thoughts, those, kind of projections that you're feeling, and you can't just assume these things. I'm
speaking from experience here. When I say that, I'm like, I take that responsibility of like,
for me, when we first had to do it, because Wyatt was diagnosed at the end of kindergarten, and it was right before COVID hit. So he actually was diagnosed 2 weeks into the lockdown. His official diagnosis came through. And then the next year, he did virtual school. So I still had a conversation with his first grade teacher, even though he was going to be doing school over his computer, about who he is and, what helps him and how we'll be supporting him while she's doing the virtual learning and all of that. But yeah, when we went into, the second grade where he was actually going back to school, I had my trepidation came from, not being believed as the scapegoat or coming off as a whiner or being a burden to the teacher by bringing the information. So I had to work through that and just say, no, this is what my kid needs. Drop all that. What if it works out? What if it doesn't? Okay, I have to look at the proper channels if the teacher is shutting down, which didn't happen. But if the teacher shuts down and is like, no, it's not a problem, ADHD doesn't exist, I would be like, okay, I'm going above you now. Yeah. Now we need to address a bigger issue. But that didn't happen, right? So just kind of preparing yourself as the parent and trying to look at, what are these fears? Are these legitimate fears? Is this something that I'm carrying? Pull all that back and say, what does my child need? How would my child be set up for success in this school year?
Yeah.
It's big.
It is big. You don't need a massive checklist. You just need to start somewhere.
Right.
Today we're going to focus on these 3 power moves that are effective and not difficult to implement, even for ADHD parents.
Yeah, I think, of course, there's, tons of things that we do every day, which we've talked about when we did our parenting month, and talking about how being a parent with ADHD, having kids with ADHD, or having a partner and kids with ADHD, and how exhausting it is and how many things you have to do and how, you have to shift what works because it's not anymore and find something else that works. But if you don't break it down and make it manageable, you will constantly feel overwhelmed and you won't take that step. So I wanted to kind of share the top 3 to focus on to just get you going and gain your confidence in these things, because then you'll notice other things that maybe you need to incorporate, and you can do those as they come, as needed, and it won't feel as overwhelming if you have these 3 things set up. So the first thing, you want to prep your environment, not just like set out their clothes and set out their backpack. That, you know, of course those things are fun, but you have to set up their systems. So if there's calendars, if there's routines, if you do morning and evening routines, they just need to be aware of them. You know, if, you know, they're posted on a whiteboard, if, you know, here's their little, you know, station in the mudroom before they leave for school. That's where their backpack is. That's where their sneakers are. That's where their jackets are. They know where everything is. They know how to, you know, walk through their routine and where everything should be. Everything should have its place, right? Doesn't have to be spick and span, perfectly neat. Everything just has to be in its space, right? And creating a calm down space for after school. We've talked about it before, how our kids, like, they put a lot of work into their day at school, and they do need that time when they come home from school to decompress, especially at the beginning of the school year. You'll notice, like, they come home really tired. Maybe, like, you know, that 45 minutes before bed is a little, they're extra tired, and you're like, oh, patience. I need to take a lot of deep breaths tonight. But they're exhausted. It's because they're excited. It's because they have those nerves. Everything is new. They're trying to learn. They're trying to process it all. They're trying to not forget. They're trying to, you know, sit still when they have to. It's so much for them. So having a calm down space, just a place that they know to go where they're comfortable. And you can practice run-throughs, you know, for first day routines, or, hey, this year, this is how this is going to work. You just kind of talk them through, like, once we find out their teacher a couple weeks before, we tell them, just set out the plan, just kind of like we do with everything. We've talked about it before, any sort of transition, just communicate it, let them know you're going to remind them. And, you know, they're not going to get it the first time. You can't expect them to get it the first time, but just keep running through it with them. I mean, even if they're in high school, just say, what do you need? You know, do you know what you need to do? What support do you need from me? Just to kind of get them feeling confident ahead of time, because things will come that throw them off, and you don't want them already feeling super, super nervous, not confident, feeling like they're lost, because then when that, you know, when something comes into their day that throws them, then they're completely overwhelmed, and the meltdown, or, you know, the feeling of failure of the day will come forward.
You said something that sparked a thought about routines. You mentioned bedtime. I think a lot of times in the summer, the bedtime routine goes out the window, and it's like, oh, we can stay up late, we can, whatever. It's just kind of anything goes. We keep our sleep routines for our boys exactly the same.
Good point.
All year round.
Right.
Because once they get on that summer sleep schedule, and then they all of a sudden have to transition to school, if you do modify the sleep schedule because of summer work schedules, you know, camps, going to grandparents' house or relatives or what, you know, vacations, if you do modify, I would recommend trying to get back to the school sleep routine at least a couple weeks ahead of school, because, you know, talk about being worn out and the right before bedtime being chaos. If you've switched their sleep schedule, sleep is one of the most crucial pieces for ADHD brains. If you switch their sleep schedule in the summer, and then all of a sudden, like, you know, the day before, okay, we're back on our sleep, like, that sleep is going to be bad. the next night, like you're going to have a tough transition.
Well, you're just setting yourself up for more issues, more struggles.
Right.
And that's not their fault. So we try to talk, like there's sometimes in the summer where kids are like, I want to jump on the trampoline longer and it's really, really nice. And of course, like the sun is out longer. They want to stay up. And the thing we try to talk to them about is like, yeah, we'll push back a little. Like bedtime doesn't have to be exactly at the same time. We give a little bit of flexibility in that, but we're not like staying up until, 9 p.m., 10 p.m., and then just like whatever, because they will wake up at the same time in the morning. So they'll wake up at 5:30, 6 a.m., no matter what time they go to sleep. So I don't know if parents, like, sometimes people are like, oh, if my kids stay up, they'll sleep in. That's great if they do that, if their body actually adjusts. A lot of times with ADHD kids, their body wakes up at 6 a.m., especially if it's light out at that time. Or they wake up at a certain time, no matter what time they go to sleep. So all that's happening is by allowing them to stay up later, you're helping them set themselves up for a day of stress. And so we talk to them about, it's not a punishment that you have to go to bed. This is to support your brain and support your body and give you the, the support to take on your day the next day with all the fun things you want to do in the summer. But if you don't get enough sleep, the next day isn't as much fun. It just isn't. So if we want to have fun and we want to do these new activities that we can do because we're not in school right now, we have to support our brain.
And just pay attention to patterns too.
Right.
If you make the decision that I'm going to let my kids stay up later because it's summertime, because they can be outdoors more or whatever, and you do that for a few days in a row and you start to see your kids struggling, then pull it back a little bit and just like help them get back on track.
Right.
And then if you want to do it again, like you're smart people.
Right.
Well,
that's the whole thing, is just paying attention and being aware of what's going on. And we've talked about it before, but we have the kids, they wear Fitbits to bed so we can kind of track their sleep. Because sometimes it is hard to know. We talk about it enough that our kids even like look at the clock or look at their watch as soon as they wake up. So they'll say what time they woke up and stuff. But that's something else you can do, is just communicate. What time do you think you woke up? But part of that summer routine also is, we try to incorporate, and we did a test last summer of not having them do any sort of schoolwork, but there's studies that ADHD brains really struggle with, not their working memory. So if you take the whole summer off and then you go back to school in the fall, they might forget a lot of the stuff that they learned. And it's not to like make them do school year round, but we found these they're called like Brain Quest books, I think. And I'm not like pointing out a brand. This isn't
not
an ad.
Sponsored.
But it's something that they can do, and they can touch on some of the stuff they've learned and then grow. And we just do maybe like 15, 20 minutes in the day. And I try to grab like something that has math, something that has reading, all their different subjects, to give them just a little bit to keep building on, to just keep their brain, in that space to move forward. And we usually there's like summer transition books. So like between this grade and this grade, and it's really catered to, to their age. And we didn't do it last summer. And I noticed, not that they were falling behind, they're really, really smart, but I did notice like some of the pushback on having to do any homework, or, kind of fighting that idea. So I think this summer we're going to incorporate it back in, just to kind of, just to keep them on a, hey, let's do the things we have to do. Then we get to do the things we want to do. And it just keeps them, feeling confident going into the next year, not super nervous, like, I don't remember how to add, or, like that panic. It helps them feel confident going into the next grade going, yeah, I know my stuff.
Exactly. you're setting your kid up for success. That if anything, you're setting them up to be ahead,
right,
and really hit the ground running. Think
teacher,
about hard
yeah.
for adult professionals. Think about how hard it is to get back into the workflow
Right.
after a vacation.
Yeah.
Take 3 months off and then try to write a marketing email or like
Jump right back in.
yeah,
Come on.
just now switch your brain over and it's time to go.
Right.
For, whether you're neurotypical or neurodiverse, like it's really, really
Right.
difficult after a long weekend for me. So, stay in practice. Keeping your kids in practice is only
Like I
going
said,
to help them.
it doesn't need to be like summer homeschool that you're like putting in the same hours that they're in school. Literally, it's like 20 minutes and I just there's different sections of this book that are the different subjects. I just grab 1 or 2 pages based on how long I think it'll take them. And they have little bookmarks, they check it off, and there's like a little chart. It's fun.
It's like a game. Yeah.
And if they struggle with something, you help them with it. But we're definitely bringing that back this summer because last summer I just noticed them struggling more and kind of not wanting to do anything sometimes. And then they get to that, oh, I'm bored, I have nothing to do, when they just have too many choices and they're not sure what to pick. So that little bit of structure, it's funny how it like spurs an idea and then they want to do something and then they come up with a fun activity or, it moves them through their day. Really, I know it sounds like maybe it comes off as I'm being strict and I'm like, nope, we have to do schoolwork all year. No, it's literally just to like, it works for their brains. It stimulates their brains. It keeps them on track and it helps them with their confidence moving into the next year. I remember one year why it was like, oh my gosh, my teacher was going through this at the beginning of the year and a lot of the kids seemed to be like, I forgot how to do that. And he was like, I had it down. And I was like, I know what I'm doing. And so he was like really proud of himself. And that's a huge part of it. It's really rewarding to see them go, oh man, not that they wanted to see other kids struggle, but they were proud of themselves because they were like, I didn't want to struggle and I didn't want my friends to struggle, but man, I had it. Mm-hmm. So like I did something right rather than I'm doing something wrong because I don't understand it.
Dopamine hit.
Definitely.
Start off the year. All right, what's the second power move?
So build a bridge with the teacher early. Like you literally, we talked about this before, but you can email the teacher. They usually send, when they send, the letter of who the child will be with. But you can send an email, but most schools now, like you said, have the day where they drop off the school supplies, you meet the teacher, they can kind of get acquainted with the classroom. And I think I've shared this before, but I do a letter about my child, and it's something I got from Attitude Magazine. And you start off and you share, I wanted to share a little bit about my child. They have, ADHD. Here are some of the things they love. And these are like all of their, not all of their strengths, but like a ton of their strengths, ways in which, my child loves this. My child is, really enjoys math. Music is their favorite class or whatever. You're listing all these things. They're really creative. They really love their friends. They really like to be a helper, different things like that. And you also say they do best in these situations, right? Like we'll say with Otis, my child loves the Beatles, loves drawing, loves math, really gravitates towards those things, right? They do best if they can stand at their desk or move around from time to time. If they get little movement breaks, if, they get a list of here's what we're doing, here's what we're doing next, and then the third thing we're doing is this. There's clear expectations for them. Then in the next paragraph, you say they also struggle with these executive function deficits, or with these are their ADHD struggles. And immediately following their struggles, you share the supports that you've put in place at home or supports that worked last year with their teacher because you were already communicating with last year's teacher about this. And if it's the first year, like you were saying earlier, share what works at home, what you've noticed, and say if there's anything else that you notice throughout the school year that's working for you, I'd love for you to share that with us so we can incorporate it at home as well. And you give them your information, let them know that you're open for you, or you want the open communication, you want that contact, and for them to not hesitate to reach out if they have any questions, all of that. So you're starting with the strengths, bringing up the struggles, but then grabbing onto here are the supports right after those struggles. It sets the teacher up with so much success that, I mean, every teacher we've given to are like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. Mm-hmm. I wish every parent would give us this, because it is, every kid is different. And yes, one technique they saw a kid with ADHD in their class last year that worked, might not work with, your child. So it's a great way to open it up. And again, if you can't, like one year we were on vacation right before school, so we couldn't go to the school supply drop-off. So we emailed the teacher. I emailed that information. We found a day to drop off the supplies, and I also gave the letter in person. But if your only opportunity is to email, you can email this letter and just open up the communication. It's super helpful for the teacher to understand that.
And it's also a really good reflection on your child's strengths and interests for a parent as well. Like, I always enjoy, you handle the letter every year and then you have me proof it. Is there anything else we should add?
Right.
But it's just fun to read about and like really reflect on, oh, this is what really makes my kid happy, and this is where he thrives, or, even where they struggle. It's still like a deep reflection. You're really, when you're amongst the chaos, right, amongst the fun, amongst the, family stuff every day, those are the easy things to miss, because right, it's just like, okay, we're making it through our day, or we're doing our routine. When you actually get to sit down and say, oh yeah, he really likes the Beatles, or he really loves to draw, or music is his favorite, then you're thinking about oh, this is what really makes my kid happy. And you don't necessarily do that all the time.
Right.
When it's just oh yeah, of course we'll play video games. It makes me happy, it makes you happy. But thinking about the joy that comes with that is just a fun exercise.
Yeah, and Attitude Magazine even has a sheet that the child can fill out. So last year I had Wyatt fill it out. And I sat there with him filling it out, but just asking him, so I've noticed these things work for you, but I want to know how you feel about these, these accommodations. Do you use, the band that we put around the bottom of your chair for your, for leg movement? He did initially use it when it first was implemented, but he noticed he wasn't using it as much. He liked either standing, or now they have the wobble stools. He likes those more. Because he doesn't notice that he's tapping as much. It's more about his upper body movement. His legs they're not really showing that energy anymore. So we shifted, and I adjusted the letter because he expressed that wasn't necessarily an accommodation that he needed, right? So when they get to a certain age and they're communicating more and they're more aware of their symptoms and how they're showing up or how they're getting distracted, just ask them, what do they need? Is this actually working? Or if they haven't tried it yet, do you think this would be something you would want to try, that we should request, or that we should offer? I mean, at one point he was, when he would get really stressed, his tic disorder would kind of, surface. And I reached out to the teacher and asked, on days when his tics are kind of, showing, and they're disruptive to other kids. And what happens when you have a tic disorder is, when other people notice, or other people point it out, or other people are annoyed, it adds to your stress, which only makes your tics worse. So redirection or, putting your hand on them in a calming way, or we say, take a breath. Just like, we don't even say, you're ticking or whatever. It was just like, hey, take a breath. He knows in his mind, oh, I was doing my tick. He'll take a breath. But one thing that we figured out is gum chewing would completely remove his need to do the tick, like a throat clearing or a noise. So reached out to the teacher, said, hey, we've noticed that he's been showing some more prevalence of his throat clearing tick. So is it okay if this week or the next couple of days he has gum? He's going to let you know when he is chewing it and make sure that you're aware. Is that cool? And every single time it's like, yeah, of course. Thank you for letting me know. It puts the child also responsible to let the teacher know, hey, I'm putting a piece of gum in. Is that okay? And making sure they're on the same page. So we're all communicating together to support that. So it's really important. And it's small things. And again, you're not trying to, none of the kids are allowed to have gum. I'm trying to get my kids special treatment. No, I'm actually helping all of the kids because the ticks can be distracting for everyone else, which adds to his stress, which makes them worse. But if he's chewing a piece of gum, even though the other kids can't, it's a benefit for everyone, right?
Yeah.
So the last one is supporting this emotional transition, like validating their feelings of excitement, of nervousness, of stress, without trying to fix it. Like, a lot of times people think support is, I'm finding the solution, I'm going to take this feeling, they're feeling stressed, I'm going to take their stress away. No. Like, I sat with both of the boys last year and talked about how I had to move all the time when I was a kid, and I was like, yeah, it's a lot, isn't it? New school year, it's a lot. I get overwhelmed with change too sometimes. Like, I get really excited, but then once the excitement kind of dies down, I realize this is a new routine and I'm not used to this. So I kind of feel out of control. Like, I get that. Does that happen to you? Or what are you feeling? And you can simply check in with them as they're going to school. Like, hey, scale 1 to 10. How was your brain today? Or something like, instead of saying, how was your day? We're always like, what's one fun thing you did today?
Yeah.
Because a lot of times they can name the fun thing, but in you asking what was the fun thing, they're going to think of something negative that happened. So you'll get a second story on that. And then I kind of like to ask them, if they say they struggled with something or there was an issue or, a bloody nose or, check out this bruise on my knee. Oh my gosh, the bruises with young boys, I don't even know how they get them, but if they share something they struggled with, something you can ask them, again, open-ended questions. You don't want to give them yes or no, or a question that's closed so that they say yes or no, because then you're not going to actually get the conversation going. And, a lot of times, especially right after school, if they're tired, they're not going to go into detail. So you ask them an open-ended question, but say, when they're struggling, you say, what did you notice when that happened? Or how did you feel about that when it happened? So that they reflect. They self-reflect in the moment when you're asking that. How did I feel? Maybe I didn't think about how I felt. I just reacted. And then you can talk them through it. So,
and I would also say, don't force it too.
No.
Right after school, our boys, when they get in the car, they're both it's
who can tell their stories
brain
first?
dump. It's a race to get the story out. And then we get home and you will ask, how was school? Or, you ask one of the questions, just yeah. And they go do their own thing.
Well, I'll go through their folders, especially our little one. His folder brings home all the stuff that he did that day, So I'll ask him, what is this? And he's like, I don't have time for you, lady.
Right. Yeah.
I'm shutting down right now. I'll talk to you about this later,
We get school stories at dinner time because then they've had time to come home and decompress. They've gotten all the stuff out in the car ride home, and then they have time to decompress.
Where they don't want to talk about school or they don't want to even deal with school.
And then and then it's like, oh, it's dinner time, which means then we're going to start getting ready for bed or whatever. So then they kind of get more out, but we actually get the details of things. And that's where I tend to ask questions like, hey, did anybody make you laugh today? Oh, what was funny about that? Or like, that's my question.
And a lot of times we'll ask, because with ADHD kids, especially if they're on ADHD medication, it's totally natural for them to like eat 3 breakfasts and not want to eat lunch. And then at dinner time, once their meds have like started to wear off and they realize that they just kind of did all their stuff, they talked through lunch usually, is they're eating again. And so we have to keep reminding, especially our younger one, which we had to do with Wyatt when he was younger, when he was first on medication. So it's the same deal, but we really have to remind him because our younger one is like his hyper focus can really just like, he thinks about nothing else.
Yeah.
He completely shuts out. He doesn't really have noise sensitivities like our older one, you know what I mean? So again, they're different. And so we have to say, what did you have for lunch while we're eating dinner? Or he'll say, he'll just bring it up, like because he's eating something at dinner and he remembers what happened in lunch. And so he'll start talking about it. And then that usually spurs, other conversations. But yeah, that's a good time to say, oh yeah, like we're all sitting down and one of them had music class today and they wanted to share something with their music teacher. So you say, hey, did you share that thing with your music teacher? Or, whatever the case is, right? That is a good time. And it does sometimes feel like you're always trying, like, I don't know. I feel like sometimes it comes off as like how do I say this properly to my kid? It's like, just sit back and be curious.
Yeah.
Like, that's really all. There's no perfect way to say it. When I say don't ask yes or no questions, just don't say a question that doesn't show any interest from you. Why would they want to answer that? If you're not actually curious and you don't really care, you're just asking for them to say yes, they're just going to start saying yes, even though they might mean no.
Exactly.
So you don't want to. The reason we talk about open-ended questions, and that's the reason why coaching is based around that, is because it offers a bigger conversation and more understanding and connection between people. So your energy, your curiosity and care about what happened in their day regulates their energy and they give it back. They're going to be more open, into their preteen, teenage years and all of that to talk to you because you are genuinely curious. You do care. You're not just having them check a box and making sure they did the quote unquote right thing that day.
Right.
So this is a bonus 4th thing, but it really encompasses all of them. Take it one thing at a time. You can't support everything all at once, and if you try to, you're going to lose that battle. You got to choose one thing. This seems to be coming up a lot. Or, you know what, this is bringing me a lot of frustration. I also notice it's bringing my older child a lot of frustration. Let's figure out what we can do about this thing right now. And we'll worry about other stuff later, right?
Yeah. Remember that this stuff is hard.
Yeah.
And not because you're failing, but because the system wasn't built with your kid or you in mind.
Right. And I think that's, any special ed educator or, parent of a child with special needs or neurodiverse child, like you can feel that school systems aren't set up to support. That's why there's accommodations. What I try, in the programs that I'm trying to work with within school districts and trying to communicate, even if it's just my kid's teacher that year, right? Trying to open up that communication and change the way that they're viewing any accommodations. Because a lot of time, I mean, teachers are so overwhelmed. They're not paid enough. They have so many kids and they have so many things that they have to check boxes for. And there's just not enough time for all of the training. Some teachers have personal experience with neurodiversity, some don't. Some are just really open and wanting to learn. Some are exhausted for reasons we don't even know, that it's hard to break that barrier. But showing everyone that making these accommodations for the entire class actually benefits all of the kids. So anything that is going to benefit an ADHD kid will actually benefit all of the kids. So it feels like less of a burden to just make this adaptation for this one child. If you're like, you know what, I should do that with all the kids. Why don't I, if they're listing the homework assignment at a certain time every day. Well, I'm going to write that on the board for this ADHD student so that they can hear me say it and they can also, see it on the board then they write it down in their planner, right? They're doing that for all of the kids, right? So there's a lot of different things throughout the day that the other kids can also benefit from that would be, an accommodation for that ADHD kid. So just flip your mindset, teachers, parents alike, about, okay, I'm just growing my awareness. I'm not behind. I'm not too late. I'm doing this work now. I'm aware. I'm going to make little shifts, one step at a time, and that's what matters. Like, your child doesn't need to be perfect. You don't need to be perfect. The teacher doesn't need to be perfect. You just need to be present, regulated, curious, just be you, be supportive, right? So if this at all feels like too much and you want support through these transitions, I offer coaching for parents just like you. So let's talk, direct message me. And if this hit home for you, subscribe, share it with someone who gets it, and leave a quick review. It helps more ADHD scapegoats and ADHD parents find their way here. You don't have to do this alone. You're not the problem. Till next time.